Ahoy, 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 and welcome back to Titanic Talkline. I already moved away from my microphone. My name is Alexia, and this week for this is you guys won't know this, but this is the second time we're trying to set this up because in the past I also had some really fascinating technical issues, but I gotta say I have never had somebody cut out mid-sentence before and never come back. That is a first, but this time I'm hoping that doesn't happen. We have Christopher Mulholland here to join us. Hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. You were just telling me you got a new computer, which to me is like equal parts exciting and really, really daunting.
It is, especially when you're trying to record a podcast and you think you have everything set up, all your microphones, your video, and then it turns out you have to go in your settings and set everything back up again.
That happens to me a lot because I don't know how familiar you are with Discord, but Discord, whenever I open it or when my computer goes to sleep and then turns back on again, Discord's always like, I've adjusted your sound settings. And it's always a whole mess. I'm like, I didn't, no, please don't.
Well, this time around when I went and bought a computer, I went with a gaming computer because I want something that had a ton of memory on it because I'm planning to write a book or two in the future.
Oh, nice.
So the salesman was like, "Well, here's a computer that's actually really affordable, has a ton of memory. It's got a terabyte of memory. It's got all these graphic cards, et cetera, that I'm not familiar with." And so I was like, okay, well, I'm in. So some of the settings are different, but I'm getting it.
My boyfriend's a game developer. I am ironically not a huge gamer. I'll play like a few here and there, but I have a gaming computer now, and I remember he insisted that we build one. That was a whole thing. I was just gonna buy one because I
Yeah.
didn't care all that much. I was like, no, let's build one. So we did. I remember him being like, well, we need to decide between the this and the that thing. Now, if you go with the this thing, there's this many technical specs and options. If you go with that one,
Yeah.
there's gonna be this many thing, but there's this third option. I'm just sitting there like, why are you throwing weapons at me in the forms of words? Please stop. Why are you attacking me? Yeah, if someone came in here and covered my eyes and like, tell me immediately, what are the specs on your computer or you die? I'd be like, I suppose I'm dead. That's
I'm
it.
dead too.
Yep, I have no freaking clue. But anyway, we're not here to talk about computers.
Right.
I have to not get ahead of myself because I remember from the last interview. So what I really remember from Chris is not to say that I don't remember a lot about my guests, but you did these really incredible, what I thought initially, but have since learned, were computer rendered blueprints. I'm sorry, I forgot the word for a second. Or
No,
line, not
that's
blueprints.
that's that's something I always want to emphasize with my work. None of it's computer
It's
generated.
not. When I first saw it, I'll admit I was doing that doom scrolling thing where you scroll by really, really quickly. And when you do go by
Right.
fast, it does look
Hmm.
computer generated. But then, I saw it, I clicked on it, I looked at it, and you showed me they are completely hand drawn.
They are, yes. As a matter of fact, I've got tons and tons of pictures on my phone from last year where I took pictures at individual stages of
That's
the drawing process because Uh, there have been times where I've posted the drawings without any progress to back it up, and then I've had some say, "Oh, well, it looks like you copied them. It looks like you did this. It looks like you used a computer. It looks like you used render." It's like, no, I hand drew everything. So I have pictures of the drawings in various stages in pencil with the rulers and the T squares and the curvatures in the picture, so they can see, yes, it's all hand drawn.
I know that last time I asked, but I don't remember how long do you, I mean, because I'm sure you didn't sit down and set a stopwatch, but about how long do you think that it took you? Because again, for the people, this is terrible for an audio podcast, but this is not an 8 by 10 piece of paper per. These are very large, sort of architectural size. Like if you've ever seen people come when they're building, like, oh my gosh, everyone's seen HGTV these days when they bring in the blueprints, they're right. They're, several feet, they're quite large. So this is not just a, no matter what size the paper is, this is not a small undertaking, but you did it at a reasonably big scale.
So I'm gonna go back in my life a little bit further. I've
Mhm.
actually been drawing for about I'm gonna say about 17 years. I started researching the ships about 20 years ago. So most of my life I've been drawing. So, I saw the James Cameron movie. I saw the blueprint that Thomas Andrews used to show Captain Smith, hey, the ship sideswiped the iceberg and opened the first five compartments. And I was always fascinated by the fact of how such a large ship could hit an iceberg and sink. I mean, somebody who's around the age of 10 years old and seeing a movie like that, it's like it defies description, really. I mean, I still can't really describe what my first experience was seeing that. But I want to learn more, and that's why I thought, I'll start doing some sketches and see, because I was always good at art, but not to this scale. No, nothing like this. So I would sit there and draw sections of the ship, over the years, and I would get better with different techniques. And then it was around 2022 when it was like, I think I've taught myself enough over the years. I think I can go ahead and take a stab at it and see if I could, draw out the deck plans of the entire ship. And I did. I started in late 2022 and ended in late spring of 23. So actually, late 22 is a little bit of a stretch. I would say the middle of the year, and then the middle of 23, because it took me about 9 months of drawing on the weekends and staying up for a considerable amount of time at night, but it was very well worth it in the end.
I think so. And, you mentioned that you took a lot of progress pictures for proof purposes, but I mean, proof or not, I actually really like progress photos. I like to draw and do projects and stuff on my own, but I'm always disappointed with myself at the end of the day because I don't document my progress. And not because I feel like there's a need to, like, oh my gosh, show off, but it's kind of cool to see, in some cases, like, where did like what did this blank piece of paper look like beforehand? And sometimes when you look at previous versions, you see where you like erased an entire section and completely redid it once you eventually go back. I think it's really cool to document your own personal progress.
It's weird though, because especially now, because I'm working on a commission project, not the Titanic, a different ship, the Cap Arcona. She was a German ocean liner, but I've also found that if you take pictures along the way, if you go back and look at your pictures you took, you notice the mistakes that you've made. It's like, oh, I've got to go back and fix that. Yeah. So I don't know really how to describe it, but if you look at your drawing in front of you and then look at a picture, it's almost like it's two different things. And then, you know,
No, I think that's true. I think there's like 100 different memes from artists who show like on the left side the drawing as you've done it and it looks really nice, and on the right side is like the drawing when you flip it and it looks like some sort of eldritch terror by mistake.
yeah.
Not usually what most people hope that their art looks like, but I actually skipped over my token question because I wanted to jump right back into where we got caught off last time. But I normally start my interviews with the my classic question of, I'm sorry, my printer is having a moment. What is your Titanic story? Because at the end of the day, that is what my show is about. But everyone's story is so different. And you had told me, not to spoil it, that you have sort of naval history in your family.
Yeah. So when I first found out about that, I hadn't heard of the Titanic, believe it or not. I mean, I was around 7 or 8 years old. I mean, my uncle is actually the one who does the family genealogy, and he was telling me some things about our uncles, our granduncles that were in war, and he had mentioned that one served on the Queen Mary. We're not exactly sure of the exact dates. We're actually in the middle of trying to break down his uh, his war story a little bit further, so we can figure out when exactly he was on board, where he was going, the dates, et cetera, et cetera. We know he was there just from one of our aunts telling us that, hey, he was on the Queen Mary, but nothing too detailed. And then we actually uncovered one of another uncle who came to America on the Aquitania in 1922. We actually found his immigration papers from Ellis Island, so we know exactly when he came to America. So, after finding that out, I came across the Titanic movie, and then it took off from there. I mean, and I say to this day, I think the whole maritime ship interest is in the bloodline, because I look back at the old home movies even from before I was born, and the opening scene is always the Delaware River, because I grew up in Philadelphia, of a barge or a tugboat doing a water salute. Like, that's almost like the opening credit every time You open one of our home movies, or if you look in the family photo album, somebody is standing in front of a sail ship or a lighthouse or something like that. So,
I think that's cool. There's a lot of families that even if they're not, directly nautical, like, not seventh generation sailors or what have you, have, a love of the water and the sea and a respect for it in that way. And I think that it's really really cool to trace that love because it can bring everyone all kinds of different places. I know it sounds like I'm not going anywhere with this, but I am. But there's a number of people that I've had on the show whose love of Titanic and other ocean liners and the sea and ships in general comes from simply media. And they don't have, they grew up on, if they're in the United States, maybe they grew up in landlocked states.
right. I mean, with me, it's not just the Titanic. And it's all ocean liners. Like I love the architecture behind all of them. I mean, I've got a list that's 3 miles long of ocean liners I want to draw within the next few years. In between, completing my commissions, of course. But that's like I mentioned the last time we tried this podcast. That now that I finished the well, let me go back a little bit on that. The drawings that you've seen, they're actually the Olympic and the Titanic from 1911. Their original layouts before they made the changes to Titanic at the end of her construction. So once I finished the plans for those two ships, I went ahead to the Lusitania, and now I'm in the middle of a huge, large scale project to draw her layout and all of her decks. Um, After I finish with the Lusitania, I want to go back and draw Britannic, Titanic's younger sister, Olympic and Titanic's younger sister. So I'm going to say that's about my 3 year schedule so far.
Sounds like it. Did you always start with drawing more architectural and naval items? Because I will say, I knew a lot of kids that drew in school, but I didn't see a lot of ships in sketchbooks. Saw a lot of people, a lot of
I, I
flowers.
I always start with ships. I
Huh.
mean, if you take the Titanic for example, the older ocean liners, my favorite aspect of their design is the sheer. The how the deck levels. If you look at a profile of a ship, the ship is usually higher in the front,
Hmm.
and then it comes back and levels out, and then it kind of rises in the back and the stern. That's the sheer of the ship.
Hmm.
So, and if you look at today's ocean liners, sorry, cruise ships, they don't have that anymore. It's just a straight box almost.
So this almost has nothing to do with anything, but I want to complain about a thing with cruise ships right now, and I think that they are just too
I,
big.
they are. I
I
mean,
I cannot fathom how big some of these things. I remember maybe it was 2 years ago or so when the first plans for those massive Royal Caribbean, the ones that I'm talking about the ones that look like small cities that
yes.
are. I remember when they put the plan
Mhm.
out for that, and I saw on the photo and got mildly nervous. I was like, that's just too big. It's just too big. It's huge.
I often said that well, maybe I'll change my mind just because I want to eventually at some point get out to sea one way or another.
Fair enough, but
But as of right now, the only ship that has my interest is the last survive the only ocean liner still afloat, or not afloat, in service is the Queen Mary 2.
yes,
That's the only one I really have a big interest in sailing on.
the others, and I say this as someone who is a fan of cruises. I like a cruise. I
Yeah.
do like the fact that you get disconnected from things because I will admit that I've done like normal beach vacations when you're at like a beach house and stuff with your family. You're always on your phone. You're still always watching TV because it's just there. And it's so
Yeah.
convenient to just dip into your screens. But when you don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have that option. So it is nice. However, it's not like you walk up to a Carnival cruise ship going, look at how aesthetic it is.
Yeah. I mean, when you get on the Queen Mary, I mean, the Queen Mary 2, I mean, it's either casual or formal. So you're about as close to as an original cruise as you're going to get. Now, cruise. Yeah, you know what I mean, sailing.
I do.
Classic sailing, not a cruise.
No, I know what you
But
mean.
but
It's also, sorry, I just looked up the Queen Mary too, just because I was
yeah,
curious. The sheer the size of it is interesting. Just interesting is a weird way to say it, but when you compare it to how other companies and ships, I was like, look at how large our ship is. Theirs is a modest 1,132 feet in length.
yeah, and then sorry,
Okay. I've gotten temporarily
I
distracted by
lost my
looking at
pen page
photos of the
again. So
staterooms.
yeah, and it's crazy to think there are cruise ships that are bigger than the Queen Mary 2 now. So
Again, we went on a small one because we sailed out of Galveston, Texas, which is not one of the like big main ports. Those are usually in Florida. But we sailed out of Galveston, and even the smaller, in quotation marks, smaller of the Carnival ships. And I also took a Carnival cruise out of Baltimore, which is an even smaller port in Maryland many years ago. Even those small ships are really big when you just think about how large they are and how much they hold and how many people they accommodate, including, a full staff. It is wild to consider how about 100 years ago the Titanic was considered titanic and gargantuan and massive, and now it's kind of like, oh,
yeah,
looks like a little baby, looks like a little baby tugboat.
it really does. I mean, if you the icon of the seas is 1,196 feet long and 248,000 GT, and
Hmm.
that's insane.
That's
I mean,
just too large. I don't understand.
and
It's too
they're always trying to make them bigger because there's
bigger.
talks of them like in the process designing one that's going to be bigger than the icon. It's like
But why? I mean, I know that I've completely derailed us, but at the time of ocean liners, which, as you've distinguished from our conversation, there is a differentiation between an ocean liner and a cruise ship. A
there
cruise
is.
ship is specifically for luxury.
Hmm.
Um, you'll notice that Titanic didn't exactly have entertainment amenities because it was not really meant as a vacation ship.
Right. I mean, for that time period, I mean, she was state of the art. I
Hmm.
mean, I mean, back then they didn't have Wi-Fi, they didn't have TVs, and they had I mean, they had the gymnasium, they had the squash court. I mean, that was their entertainment back then. Just smoke room for the gentlemen, and you had the libraries and the common areas, the reading and writing room.
I find it fascinating to see how far, society has changed. And I know that part of it is due to technology. Obviously, you just mentioned like Wi-Fi and TV. Those are just, if we just look at the introduction of technology, but just the way that societal norms have changed. Like promenading in and of itself used to be an activity.
Yeah, yeah, just walking along the deck.
Hmm.
Today, they couldn't care less. I mean, today, I mean, from what I've heard from many people who've been on cruises, one of the big sellers is having a stateroom with their own balcony,
I do
so
like
they could
that.
just be in their own area rather than mingling amongst everybody else.
I will
But
also say that it is slightly less pleasant to just wander around on the decks outside because, again, from my own experience, there's
yeah,
people tend to travel in massive groups. So you'll run into
yeah,
groups of like 6 people taking up the whole aisle. People are very drunk, depending what time of the day, and sometimes at all hours of the day.
yeah. I mean, we think of
A
these
lot.
cruise ships as large, but then in reality, when you come across a situation like that, what you said, when you have groups of people, it's not necessarily as big as you
Mm-mm.
think.
It's not. And again, I say that as somebody who likes cruising, but again, like ocean liners were not meant for vacation. Like, people did not take voyages for vacation in the same way that people do now. Like the richest of the rich would maybe, but it was still more practical. You would use it to get from A to B.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, a lot of times, you'll have people that will sail over to Europe because they're taking a tour. That's their vacation, and then the ocean liner is their way of getting there and back. They're not using it to as a vacation spot.
No. And It's just it's interesting when again I keep saying it's interesting because the more I think about societal differences, the more interested in them I get. But the fact that it is pretty normal for people now in 2024, it's pretty normal for a majority of people to expect to have some form of vacation during the year, whether it's something small like a weekend getaway with your family, or for some people it could be multiple very expensive vacations per year. But it's sort of expected that yes, this is something that I do.
But yeah, and the other one of the other things that attracted me to like the older cruise ships, for example, is like what we were saying. To me, the older ocean liners had um they had more character because each one of them was different in their own way. Today, they just look too similar.
You can get lost on a cruise ship very
Yeah,
easily. You walk up and down and
yeah,
people have kind of like silly stickers and signs. Part of it is to be like, look at me, I'm very interesting. And the other part of it is I need to be able to find my door. Okay. They all look the same. My boyfriend and I just grabbed some stickers we had in my backpack and put them on the door because otherwise it was like, how in the hell are we gonna find this door? They're all
no,
absolutely identical.
I mean, if you look at the Titanic, for example, I mean, it was the same way back then because a lot of if you watch documentaries where they dramatize what actually happened, a lot of them like to say, "Oh, well, the third class people they got trapped down in third class spaces, and that's how they all died." Actually, when you really look at it, the reason why they died down there is because they couldn't find their way up.
It's very
I
maze
mean,
like.
when I was sitting there drawing, I mean, I knew that, but I really understood it better when I drew the deck plans because especially when I got down in the third class space and I saw how jammed everything was, it was like goodness,
I
you know,
remember reading an interview somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but it was Lightoller. And, Second Officer Charles Lightoller was a very experienced seaman. I think
yeah,
this must have been during one of the Senate, but during one of the during one of the trials or hearings, where he said that even he took a really long time to acclimate to the ship, and that was despite spending a lot of time on board before its actual maiden voyage during the sea trials, and just
yeah,
wandering around. And even that, it's still very confusing.
yeah, and especially if you get into a situation where you're in distress like they were that night.
You know, I think it's really weird too. I was gonna say interesting. I'm gonna start like making myself take a shot if I say interesting. Um, there is so much in so many movies. I would have done that, or I could have done that, or I would have done this.
Yeah,
And I've never been in the kind of peril where I genuinely thought my life is in danger. So I just want to say that that's never happened to me. I'm very fortunate. I have been in situations where I've had a lot of fear and anxiety though. And you love to think that in the moment you're gonna be like Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones, be like, yeah, I got it. I'm all together. I've got my cool hat. I've got my whip, got it all figured out. Very rarely are you like that. You usually don't have a cool hat. You usually just had a minor breakdown, and it's very hard to make exceptionally reasonable decisions because your brain's just going into absolute overdrive. And it's really easy to be like, well, I would have simply done this and I would not have panicked and I would have done that. But it's impossible to say what you would do under that level.
and well, that's like from my own life experience so far, like you said, you can say you would have done this or that, but until you're actually in that situation, you don't know how your mind's going to react. So you can't say what you would do because you don't know what you're going to do until you're there.
And that's, I'm sure that especially for people who survived, there's 100 million things that you think of about I should have done this or I should have done that. I have situations in my own life that again were not life and death scenarios where I still think back like if only I'd done this or if only I hadn't done that or maybe if I called this person um instead of texting them they would have picked up and they wouldn't have been so sad and you start taking
Right.
yourself yeah, on these journeys of what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And I find that fascinating because that comes up with Titanic all the time. Whenever people watch the movie or someone who's never seen the movie, they always come like, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have just run right for it. No, are you sure? Do you know that?
No, because you're not there.
No, because I think the most common one I hear is from like guys who've just moved like, I would just let the women go right ahead. Like, I wouldn't even fight. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be a man. I'm like, are you sure you wouldn't want to try to save your own life? Not even once? You're 100% sure of that? 26. 26. You're
Yeah,
ready to
well,
go.
yeah, we'll see what happens when you're in that situation, when your mind starts, you know, playing
But
these tricks on you, and yeah,
that's not to say that people can't be chivalrous or wouldn't be chivalrous, but I know that I'm a kind of selfish person. So it's like, I like to think that, you'd stop and help all of the children, but
right.
I don't know, maybe I'd be too scared.
But in a situation like that night, it would have been impossible to help everybody because they didn't have
Yeah.
enough light. I mean, they let me stop myself before I say that wrong.
I know, I
They
was
had
about to say, oh no.
they actually had more than enough by the British Board of Trade, but not to save everybody.
I think I've
So they were
started.
actually they were actually in the right. They had
It's,
more than enough, more than what was required, but not enough to save everybody.
I think
That's
what I heard someone say once and what I started saying is they had more than regulation, but not enough morally. Where it's kind of like,
right.
yeah, all the guidelines said that they had more than they were supposed to, but like knowing now what we know and knowing our compasses and our hearts and how we think about things, did they have enough? No.
But here's the thing, and that's one of the reasons. You know, one of the things people attack the Titanic for is not morally having enough lifeboats, but they don't realize that all the ocean liners didn't have enough back then because it wasn't until Titanic sank that they were like, "Up, we need to change these regulations," and they did.
It's been a while since I actually talked about the regulations, just because it's probably been over a year or so. So, just quickly for people who might be newer to the show, before the sinking of the Titanic, there used to be an appointment of lifeboats based on the size of the ship, the weight of the ship, like the class of the size of the ship. It was not based on how many people can it accommodate, which is
Yeah, it was
now
based
how
on
we do it.
yeah, it was weight. I mean,
And there had also never been
it,
ships of this size before. So it's sort of like, sorry, I didn't
right?
mean to interrupt you, but to finish it,
No, no,
like if, yeah, if they'd only had guidelines for dogs that weighed up to 100 pounds and suddenly somebody brought a dog that weighed 250 pounds to the dog show, it would be like, well, we can't tell you no, but we only allow 1 cup of food per animals over 75 pounds. Like that's just the allowance. You're not going to get more food for your dog. It would be very odd. We think about it as like, what dogs need all the food that they need? But it's sort of like, well, that was the regulation. No one had ever brought a 250-pound wolf to the dog show before.
I mean, if you look at the Titanic, for example, I mean, 10,000 pounds or more, or sorry, 10,000 tons or more. It was 16 lifeboats. I mean, if you look at the Lusitania, for example, because I'm drawing the Lusitania as she was built, not after the Titanic sank with all the additional lifeboats. As she was built, she had
Hmm.
16 lifeboats, just like Titanic did, except with Titanic, they had 4 extra lifeboats.
Yeah, than they
So
were supposed to. And just wild when you think about these.
actually, like I said, morally, as you said, are you still
Huh? Sorry, were you asking me something? Yeah, absolutely.
well, it froze. That's why
Oh, sorry,
I
sorry.
suddenly went on. So,
Technology is absolutely joyous. Um,
yeah, it is.
Yeah, no, all I was saying is that it's really interesting when you think about how regulations, some things that we consider to be absolutely normal or regulation or standard at one point in time were definitely not. Everything, and I think the example that I always end up bringing up is how I once saw this was walking on the sidewalk. I saw these a couple collapsing their baby stroller. They just put their baby in the car seat in the car. And I happened to see on the side the instruction sticker, and in big, big letters, it says step one, remove child. And I kind of laughed at that because I'm like, of course you'd remove your kid before you collapse. And then I had to think, it's like, I'm betting somebody folded a kid up in there. And now there's a regulation that says you have to say that now because
Yeah.
everything, what is the saying is something like, every regulation has been written in someone's blood. It's really sad, but it's true.
Yeah. So, but I mean, even though she only had the 16 plus the four collapsibles, they were actually prepared for when the regulations changed because there was talk amongst the British Board of Trade they were going to change the regulation, but they just didn't know when. So when they built, the Titanic and her sister Olympic, they went ahead and put the davits on there so that they could actually accommodate more lifeboats in the event of the regulation change because it would have been cheaper for them to do it that way than take them out of service, get rid of the old lifeboat davits, put the new ones in. So why not just
Yeah,
prepare?
I agree. It would be the same thing if I were any kind of business person. I was building, I don't know, if I were making sweaters and they said there's a possibility that in October there's going to be a regulation that every sweater has to have at least one pocket, I would just
Hmm.
start designing sweaters with one pocket minimum right now because it's not
Yeah.
worth sending something into production, having it made, just as you're saying, to have to take everything that went out off of the shelves,
Right.
redo it, bring it back around. It's a big thing. And as you're talking about with something like a ship, it's millions of dollars to outfit it, and then there's millions of lost dollars to remove it from service long enough to disassemble however much you need and reassemble it back together. But I've never taken apart a ship before, and I hope never to have to. Well, because I'm thinking like anytime you read any description about the Titanic, they always talk about how opulent it is, and that's not a bad thing. But I'm thinking to
No.
myself, okay, if I had to redo a house that had just been built, and they were talking about how they have this beautiful mahogany flooring and this crown molding and glass cut chandeliers. That's a lot to have to undo and take care of. You have to move a Steinway grand piano with
Yeah.
white gloves. It's such a production. Like, this isn't even a demo job. You're not just clear bringing it all in. You have to do this with kid gloves. So it does make more sense to do that. I guess it's just, we look back on it 112 years later thinking, wow, they should have just gone through and added, 2 to 3 times the lifeboats, but that's not what happened. I don't know. Sorry. You mentioned that you're doing a few more ship blueprints coming up.
Right.
And as you pointed out, that's your next 3 years already worked out because I'm sure that's going to take a long time.
Well,
When
then
Yeah, I was gonna say, how did you decide which ones to do? Because if you're anything like me, you have way more ideas than you have time.
that's exactly it. I mean, the Olympic class and the Lusitania class, being the Lusitania and the Mauritania, they were my main interest from the get go. So I already knew that I wanted to at least get the Olympic class plans done and then complete the Lusitania. But like for example, I sat there and thought about one night. Well, maybe it'd be pretty cool because the Queen Mary is one of the last surviving ocean liners. She's not in service, but she's still here. I thought about drawing her profile on all of her decks as a huge project. I mean, it's a bigger project than the Olympic class. I thought maybe about flying out to Long Beach and actually visiting the Queen Mary because again, I had an uncle that served on board during World War II, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to start that project there by drawing a section of it on board the ship. So that's my goal around 2026, 2027, somewhere in there.
I was looking on the Queen Mary's website, as I mentioned earlier, and I like, and I'm sure some people absolutely hate the fact that I think you can only do like 8+ day voyages.
Yeah,
Oh, I love that. See, I'm all in for a really, I told almost anyone that's like, I would love to do one of those like month-long cruises. I think that would make a lot of people sick, but I love that idea of just being on the ocean for that period of time. Like I have a few friends that are afraid of the open ocean. I respect that. I understand.
yeah.
I like it so much. I find it relaxing.
I I mean I can understand why the fear, because I mean you're in the middle of nowhere, you're in water. I mean there's nothing within miles and miles and miles.
Oh yeah, no, these are not unfounded fears. I am not making
Yeah,
fun of anybody with these
yeah,
fears. I think they're exceptionally rational. I have my own irrational fears. The
right.
ocean and open water, just for me, do not happen to be them. I have different ones, like spiders. I'm one of those people. Something about the way that they move, I cannot handle it. But I remember I have a friend, and he and his dad went to Ocean City for a weekend. They get back, I'm like, how was the trip? Did you guys go to the ocean? Did you have fun? And he says, no, we didn't, because we're both afraid of the open ocean. So we just drank beer in the hotel room. I'm like, what the hell did you go to Ocean City? You could have saved yourself a 3 hour drive. Okay. That's an interesting choice to me, just because if you're afraid of the open ocean, maybe we don't do that. I don't know. It's an interesting choice, but I hear of people that go on cruises who are afraid of the open ocean, and that absolutely blows my mind.
Probably because they feel like if they get a cabin like in the middle of the ship or something like that where there's no view of the ocean, they can avoid it.
Okay, but
But
I feel like that would be
you
worse.
can't forever.
Ugh.
I've heard that theory before. That's why I was, yeah, that's why I was
That's,
repeating it. But
so I've been in an interior cabin before.
yeah,
Only once. And I will say it doesn't make you seasick, but it really makes you feel more claustrophobic when you can't see the outside. Even
yeah,
if you don't have more space in your cabin, if you have a porthole, even just to give you the illusion that there is something outside the four walls of your room, it can help. But when it's just that, especially if there's rain or anything where you can hear things outside that you know you'd normally be able to see, it can be a little disconcerting, to be perfectly honest. But it's not awful. And I will also say that when I did the interior room, excuse me, I suddenly got the hiccups, but I was with a friend of mine, and we kind of agreed, we were broke college kids. So we're just sort of like, okay, we're going to do the cheapest thing possible, and we're going to spend as little time in the room as possible. And that worked out. If you have an interior room, just leave it at 8 in the morning and don't come back till you're ready to pass out. Then it doesn't matter how small it is. The last time so I'm sorry, let me try that again. Going back to, because you said that you have a lot of history with the ocean, and you talked about a couple of like the deck plans that you want to draw on, and you wanted to go on a voyage on the Queen Mary. Do you have any?
well, let me back up there a minute. When I said the Queen Mary, I meant actually visiting the original Queen Mary in Long Beach.
Ah,
'Cause
you
I
don't
want to
mean the
draw
still
her and her.
operational too.
Well, I do want to eventually take a voyage on the Queen Mary too, but one of the ships I want to draw is the original Queen Mary and her deck plans. I want to eventually travel to Long Beach and actually start the project on board, because I think that would be a unique twist because she's one of the
Yeah,
last surviving
I think so.
original ocean liners. So
Well, that actually answers one of my questions, because my question was going to, well, it actually answers part of my question. My question was going to be, did you have any other nautical goals? I like to ask this question to people that you have for the future. Like, I know for some people, they come on here and they talk about wanting to go visit, the monuments and the museums in a majority of my guests are from the United States. So a lot of them said that they want to go to visit the ones in the UK.
yeah, eventually I would like to do that. In October, I'm actually presenting in Halifax. So while I'm there, I want to be able to go and actually see the cemeteries and pay my respects to the victims that are buried there. So
Are you I don't know why I'm having trouble with words all of a sudden. Are you presenting your Titanic blueprints?
yes, I am.
What's the
So
occasion? Can you talk about it or?
oh, I can talk about it. Yeah,
Oh,
I
cool,
mean,
great.
it was just I was approached. Hang on a second, sorry.
Uh-huh.
I was approached by Titanic Society of Canada, and
Ooh.
they asked me if I would be interested in coming up to Halifax and presenting my blueprints and also just giving a presentation along with it. So, and
Yeah.
then while I was up there, it'll give me the opportunity to go and visit the cemeteries and monuments. So
That's
it'll give
awesome.
me a chance to sell. It'll give me a chance to sell some of the smaller prints also.
Oh yeah, because you do sell smaller versions of the print as well. Do you have a website where you sell them?
I have them on my Etsy page at the moment. Um,
Gotcha.
this year, I am planning to actually launch an actual website,
Excellent.
but for right now, while I'm still trying to get everything put together, I'm using my
No,
Etsy page.
I
And
completely
then
understand.
um, I would like to try to start selling them on Amazon by the end of the year. So,
Really?
but when we're in Pigeon Forge in a couple weeks, I'll actually have packets of the smaller prints that I'll be selling at the conference, so
Oh,
they'll be
nice.
available.
I'm not going to be selling anything. I don't have anything for the show. Everything I have for the show is free. Otherwise, those just they're like cheap little stickers and buttons. Like, oh, you owe me 13 cents now. Yeah, no, it's not worth it. I should figure that out. I should have merch, but I like this. So, okay, I've been to the Titanic convention a few times now, and I'm hoping
Yeah,
that the longer I continue to go, the more people will have more stuff to sell. Because no offense to everybody else, I've already seen the same few people, and I know there's going to be more people who have stuff here, and I'm excited to see new vendors. I
yeah.
love
So I mean
vendors.
the packet I'm gonna be selling and what I've sold at other presentations because I actually just presented in New York City actually alongside of a Titanic author Angelica Harris, and she'll be with us in Pigeon Forge
I
in
love
the
her
upcoming week.
so much. She's
So
so cool.
yeah, she is. We've her and I have been partnering. Sorry, her and I have been getting together and actually presenting our Titanic story, like her with her uncle-in-laws, me with the blueprints, and we've made a pretty good duo in the past. So we're gonna keep
Nice.
continue to do so.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
it's not 100% sure certain yet, but it's possible she'll be with me in Halifax in October. The
That'd
same,
be so cool.
yeah, for the same
That
purpose. So I mean,
that's awesome.
um, yeah. So with the packets, I mean, there's 3 pages, just like the original drawings are. Um, they're 11 by 17s. They have the profile and two of the decks under them, and then the second page is the middle 4 decks, and then the last page is the last 4 decks. So I mean, in a clear plastic sleeve with an event card that I'll sign and a business card. So I mean, it's a nice little package. You get a set of the prints and a lot of information in them.
It's really awesome to see more speaking events for Titanic people in the community that it's just it's really fun to see everyone going on to be able to talk on bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger platforms and see where everything goes because I think that like in the 90s every few years or so for one reason or another there is a resurgence with Titanic. Now this time it happened to coincide with the anniversary and then with the Titan sinking, there was
Right.
kind of rather a lot that brought it back into the zeitgeist. Oh my God, my dog is being ridiculous. But in the midst of tragedy comes good in the sense that I do like to see that Angelica's getting to talk in more places. I loved hearing her talk about her uncles. She was
Yeah.
on my show a good while ago. If anybody wants to look it up, she talks about the Paracchio brothers, her uncles. Like I
Yeah.
loved hearing that story. And I do also like just talking to quote unquote ordinary people. Like I love talking to people like you who go and talk places and Craig Sopin, who's a friend of mine who donates to the museums and has a collection, and
Right.
LA Beatles, who has the Unsinkable podcast. I love talking to people like that, but I also really like learning individual stories because at the end of the day, everyone's is so interesting. Like I love to find out what prompts someone at an early age to decide I'm going to draw the Titanic blueprints because I would never. That's such a daunting
Yeah.
undertaking to me.
And you're not the first person who's approached me and said that. Like, when I was presenting in New York City, I mean, I bumped into people who saw them online, and when they saw them in person, they were completely blown away because the difference of seeing it online versus in person are
It I
two
I've
different things.
only I've only seen them with you holding them up.
Yeah.
And again, people who are listening, like even from that, I can tell that they are large, but there is nothing when you have something of that size that can compare to an in-person viewing to truly be able to marvel at the scale.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the packets, I mean, even though they're shrunk down to a much smaller size than the originals, they're still very legible, and the details are still very clear,
Mhm.
which is
It,
amazing because it allows whoever purchases the drawings to actually be able to look at them in their hands rather than a huge rollout.
again, for people who don't understand that when you make a physical drawing that you want to turn digital, there are far more concerns that go into that than you think. Yeah, Chris is nodding like, uh-huh. So just as
Yeah,
someone who doesn't know a whole lot, for me, if I draw a circle on a piece of paper and just scan it on my scanner without thinking too hard and post it on Facebook, it's going to be very fuzzy. You have to
if they,
do, yeah, everything has to be done differently, even from like basically the start, if you know you're going to be making something to be optimized for digital production.
right. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. That's the only reason I know this. I'm just going to talk through that while he adjusts. I have several friends who are artists, and I've seen the sort of painstaking, arduous effort that they go through when they're finishing a painting to do things like get the minuscule little drops of paint off to make the lines as crisp as possible. Because when you go into something like Photoshop and start doing editing, you can mess with the tones and the gradients, and you want to do as little editing to your work as possible in production. So being able to have a digital file that you can produce on a small scale, it's a pretty big accomplishment. Anyway, you're going to show me something.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Sorry,
the
viewers, this is
listeners won't be
private.
able to see it, but
It's too bad.
but here, this is what the print looks like that I'm going to be
I like that. I'm
selling
gonna
in
have to buy
Pigeon
one.
Forge. Yeah, yep.
He has a he stuck a very nice little custom card for the convention in there with his name and a photo of the Pigeon Forge Museum. And then of
That
course the
I
prints are in the
designed.
back. Oh yeah, he designed this. This is clearly made by him.
Yeah, has my logo, name where
I
I'll
like it.
sign the card, the name of the event, the dates, the location, and the
I think it
picture of the ship
looks
I took myself. Yep.
I think it looks slick as hell.
But if you look at the drawing,
They look great.
they're yeah, they're still very clear.
Oh yeah, crisp lines. I don't see any, I don't know how you would describe them, but if you scan something or print something too many times, sometimes straight lines can become a little
Yeah,
pixelated or a little clouded. None of
and they
that
can
here.
still
These
be
look
read.
perfectly crisp.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
great. For
And like I said, they come in a clear plastic sleeve so they can be protected. So
is there, so you said there's an Etsy shop where people can buy them. I'm
there
going to
is.
put, yes, I'm going to put the link in the description box so that if you're driving or anywhere you can't write it down, you can refer to the description box later on. But for those of us who maybe are in a place to listen, can you give us your shop info for anyone who wants to look it up?
Yes. 1 second. I was actually trying to get the link for you so that you could.
That's me. I'm that kind of person that's like, yeah, I have that
Yeah.
ready. I don't. Um,
Uh, that's the first time I've ever gone on Etsy and actually searched it and it came right up.
I do have to admit, I sometimes have trouble with Etsy being, as I would say, search friendly.
Yeah. So for those who can't see a link, if you go on Etsy and look up Full Steam Ahead Shop or just type in um, Olympic and Titanic deck plans, it'll come right up. Just
Yeah.
when you find them, look for the Full Steam Ahead Shop name.
Yes, you should absolutely go ahead and take a look at those. And obviously, if you're going to be at Titanic Convention this year, in just well, a little bit over a week, you should go ahead and check them out in person. The full size ones will be there, and then you can purchase smaller size versions of the print to take home and frame. I'm gonna have to grab a set while I'm out there. I'm just trying to think of how I'm gonna drive them back to Texas without squishing them. I'll figure it out.
But that's the beauty of the smaller prints is you can put something in between them to keep them.
Gonna have to do that. I'll figure it out somehow. But let's see, before I take up too much more of your time, were there any other nautical goals that you had? Because you've mentioned that you want to start your deck plans on the Queen Mary. You eventually want to take a voyage on the Queen Mary too. Anything else for modern maritime stuff,
There
or
are
is everything else
so
boring?
there are so many things that I want to accomplish in so little time, but
Give me
you know,
three that I haven't heard that I didn't list off.
the SS United States, I would
Okay.
really like to be able to draw her profile and deck plans at some point because if you've watched the news or seen any of the news articles online, it's not looking good for her.
No, I see this
She
here.
has she has been docked in Philadelphia for as long as I've been alive. That's where I grew
I
up, by the way. I've grew up passing by her so many times, just watching her over the years, just sit, and
I see here that the SS United States is docked at Pier 82 in South Philadelphia, but must leave by September
yes,
12th. Members of, marine officials in Florida, this is as of yesterday. Marine officials
hmm
in Florida are proposing a plan to sink the SS United States and turn her into an artificial reef, which
yeah,
is not the worst fate in the world for an ocean liner, but it is sad.
it is. I mean, I understand how astronomical the cost would be to turn her
Mhm.
into a conference center or in a hotel, just like the Queen Mary. But at the same time, if it really has to come down to a fate, I'd rather it's sunk than scrapped. Because at least if it's sunk, then it's still with us in some form or another.
Yes, it seems as though
But
the actual plan is to turn it into an artificial reef, which again is not the best fate in the world, but as you said, it would be sunk in one piece.
yeah,
Um, well, that's disappointing. Besides the SS United States, is there give me a couple others that you're hoping to see?
well, as I mentioned earlier, that I was planning on starting my first book. I mean, I want to draw the profile and deck plans for Britannic, Olympic, and Titanic's younger sister at some point, so I can use those in my first book because I want to be able to use my deck plans and actually write about the how the idea came about for the Olympic class ships, how they were built and their layouts, what was the same, what was different.
Right.
So those are
All
just
right.
some of my goals right now. So the Queen Mary, the SS United States, and my first book,
Well, that's really exciting. I think that, to be
and
fair, that's a lot.
somewhere in there finish the Lusitania also
Yeah.
because I'm about halfway through that project and I want to get it done.
Yeah,
So
I get that. I don't like having work
and the
in progress.
traveling in between, also the traveling and presenting in between. So
Well, that sounds like a 5-year plan to me.
it yeah, it probably is more like a 5 year and a 3 year, but
That's not bad. It's good. It means that there's a lot of opportunities out there, and that's exciting.
yeah. And I mean, like with the commission that I'm working on right now, like I want to be able to pick up more of those. I mean, this was my first one, and so far, I started back in late June, early July. I told my commissioner I'd have it. I it'd probably be about a year, and
Hmm.
so far I'm already months ahead of it, ahead of schedule on it. I mean, I've got the profile already about 70% done, and I've got the other deck plans already outlined. So I mean, it's moving quite smoothly. So, but that is my
Nice.
goal also is to be able to pick up more commissions.
Good. I hope that that happens for you.
I hope so too.
I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't. You have very awesome work, and I hope to see more of it. Awesome. Well, I don't want to, again, it sounds, yeah, sorry. You can, obviously, we can include your email with the link. Sorry, he sent me a message and I wanted to let you guys know that if you are interested in commissioning Chris, we will post his email in the description box. I will say I don't normally typically post people's emails because they ask me not to. But in your case, if because you're open for commissions, we are happy to post your email and get as many people as we can. Be
I
awesome if we can
appreciate
get
it. Thank
somebody
you.
new in there. But
Yes.
any last thoughts before I let you get back to your very, 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 very busy schedule of presenting for everyone in the world and doing all of the drawing?
Um, at the moment, no,
Cool. I guess
not
we
this.
can leave it with we will see everyone who's cool at TitanicCon and everyone who's not, we won't, I guess. That's a lie. I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Chris, for coming on. I'm excited to see
Thank you
your
for having me.
yeah, no problem. I keep saying it, but I am excited to see these in person. I love looking at art. So I will see you in what, like 10 days or so?
Yeah, it's coming up quick,
That's
very
so
quick.
crazy. Well, I will see you then. So bye everyone.